I never try to sing like Michael. I don't try to dance like him either, but he does make you move, right?
Power, oh, power is the force that makes it happen. Woo. Welcome to the greatness machine, Bill Gallagher.
I could play it here too.
Oh man, I love it, brother. Welcome to the greatness machine. Love having
Thank you.
I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and we have a great show in store for you guys. We got the one, the only, the man of the hour, my friend, Bill Gallagher. Thank you for coming, my friend.
So good to see you.
You too.
At least here, remotely, virtually.
I know. One day, we'll see each other again. Guys, I want to just do a little housekeeping. Look, the format of the show is very simple. We're bringing together change makers who are creating greatness in the world by living their passions. And right now, we are no short of neither greatness nor passion with our friend Bill here. A couple things to know about live streaming. Number one, we are live. Start a watch party. Ask us questions. I have my team on standby, ready for your instant messages. Just put them in the thread. They'll send them over to us, and we'll be jumping into a lot of different topics today with Bill here. A couple things about Bill, like he's a really special guest. I've done his podcast a couple times, but first of all, serial entrepreneur, over 30 years in business, former CEO, speaker, high growth CEO, coach, outdoorsman, and of course, host of the Scaling Up podcast. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much.
So, where do we begin, man? Like, what's been going on in your world? And I know it's a lot, but I want to hear all about it.
I'm exploring all corners of my property.
Yeah.
Most of the time I'm here in this little office studio, which I think looks a little bit bigger than it actually is. But, and I do most of my work instead of flying now, but then sometimes I go outside and I sit on the front deck and I handle some calls from there. And then we have a little sun porch with one of those basket chairs, and I'll sit in there and I'll do some of my writing. And then every day I try to finish a little bit early on days when I'm not working with someone in a different time zone. And then I really get into the cooking. So I think the day before and the day of a lot about what's coming on the menu.
Nice.
So last night we had like a Greek chicken and a Greek salad with some pickled beets and a little leftover risotto. Oh. And tonight is going to be a steak with some Brussels sprouts, some sweet and spicy Brussels sprouts. And I haven't figured out the third thing yet to go into it, but some other vegetables.
So let me ask a question, because so the audience doesn't know, but I this is like one of those rare instances where you make friends with somebody and then you make friends with their spouse and like not through them, like separately, and then you're friends with both of them from two different worlds. So I made friends with Bill through EO San Francisco, where he was running the accelerator program and I was a mentor, and then I joined Gathering of Titans. And I met Lori and became friends with her with that, like not through you, through her separately. So who's the cook? You, her, both?
So Lori is great at the shopping.
Okay.
And she doesn't mind doing the dishes, and she's an appreciative eater, but I do the cooking.
Okay. It sounded
90% of the time. And I grew up learning to cook and worked in and around restaurants, and I really like, it's a great shift for me at the end of the day to move out of the talking and that kind of thing and do something sensory and physical. And so I will crank the music, and I have like the Be Ill dance playlist, and with 400 and some songs that are all movable. And I'll fire that up at maximum volume. And we have like, in addition to the Sirius B&W sound system in the living room, I have 12 zone Sonos system around the house.
Nice.
And so everything is kind of maximum volume, which of course keeps Lori out because it's too loud for her. And then I will cook and get totally lost in that vibe until it's time to crack the wine and eat. Right. So that's kind of not every day, but a very typical and
awesome.
not my work, right? Like, but an area of kind of like mental well-being.
Yeah, well, and you kind of made such a good point. It's a juxtaposition around this, like being on, and especially in coaching and business right now. I got to assume, and this is maybe a question and a statement, it's all happening on Zoom, right? So you're living on Zoom for most of the day. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, most of the day, right? I just did my first in-person team session, which we did outside at a resort a couple hours from here.
Okay.
And we all kind of we had an indoor outdoor kind of mixed room, and that wasn't really comfortable. So we just moved and we did almost all the day outdoor. And then next week I do 2 days with a new scaling client team in the area here, but it's going to be in a backyard setting. So we'll all be spread out outdoors, open air with some shade, and we'll work through our stuff. That's a new thing, but most of the time it's been on Zoom, which is where like I've had to upgrade lighting and microphones and backdrops and things like that to get really good at creating an experience with our teams. And so I'm now working with teams in the Middle East, in New Zealand, in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in across the US, Canada. Like I'm working with people all over the world, just like I used to fly, except now it's like this. And sometimes that sucks because when you fly there, you like adjust to the time zone. But now I'm like, okay, I have to get up really early in the morning or go to bed very late sometimes to work with a team.
Yeah, it's funny. Yesterday was my first experience with something like that. Because I'm an early riser, I get up about 4:20 in the morning every morning, and I did a talk for the change makers down in Australia. And
yes,
and that was at 8 p.m. It was
yes,
like an early morning talk for them because they're based out of Perth. And I was like 16, 18 hours into my day. And then I'm like on doing this really intense talk about the book around core values and I get fired up. And well, the funny thing about that was, I mean, first of all, I was worried about it because I was tired going into it, and because I just put in a full day and then some. Like this is like a half day, 12-hour day.
Yeah.
And then so I power napped. I drank a little bit of coffee at 6:30 at night, which is not a smart thing to do, and a little being an entire cup. And then I pounded out the talk. And then all the adrenaline in me was stuck there. I didn't go to bed till midnight. So it was a 20-hour day. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how people do this, but I did.
Well, if I lead a workshop or I talk on a big stage in person, it's the same kind of thing. I'm like wound up and I need to come down. I've poured, so I'm drained, but I wound up, and now I have to create the same thing because most people are like, oh my God, another Zoom meeting. Well, I promise an amazing experience, not just the results of the production, but a great. So I'm always thinking about how do I do it? How do I make our graphics better? How do I make the music? I mean, you started with music, right? We're playing music all the time in our sessions. We go in and out of breaks. And I'll just throw in like a random thing that throws into like a different vibe, right? And then suddenly like, okay, let's go to the next break. Like, so let's everybody take up, or the energy is flagging. Let's get up and move.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll pull stuff from that playlist, or it's time to move on. And I'm like, okay, Elmo says, let's move on. It's very much like a mix of like a live TV show or whatever, that we're trying to help people stay engaged. Let's celebrate the wins of the quarter, of the week, of the whatever it is. More cowbell, right? It's cheesy and schmaltzy, but it is also fun.
Yeah. No,
right. To be able to do those kinds of things. Right.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I mean, I got the gear set up, but I'm still playing with it. And even for me, I was like, you know what? I can make this like a regular old podcast live stream, or I'm like, I'll just start shows. And even for you, I said, hey, what's your favorite songs? Right. And I figured it's an easy way for people to kind of get warmed up, because if it's your favorite song, it's going to be hard for you to like sit there and not move a little bit.
I think that it's a good thing you cued. And for me, it's challenging because music's a big feature. And I mean, if you look this way, there's a little DJ mixing board, controller board over here. So I think a lot about the music. And so there's a different song for every moment. Many of our team's quarterly themes revolve around particular songs, right? So as we go through, I don't know, maybe we're celebrating or we're acknowledging the things that didn't go well in a quarter. And I might talk about how shit doesn't work out. All the brains.
This is, dude, you're totally like when I didn't know you were a DJ, by the way, till you wrote me that on Instagram.
Yeah.
So this is your old DJ tactics coming in.
Gotta tap into it, right?
But you know what's interesting is what we're talking about here are in live person, we take for granted all the different senses we get to use, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay. Hey, Bill, do you feel me? We're in the same room. You can feel my vibe. You can tell the tone. You can feel the sweat coming off people, you know, or that they're heat. And you don't get that in this, you know.
Yeah.
So
well, you can, right? And the more you connect with people, and I think like having room to move through the spaces, which is totally like initially, right? What happened was I was traveling around the world. I did a bunch of things. It was one of my sort of circuit things. I come back. I've touched 8 countries, a bunch of cities, lots and lots of people. And a week later, we get our lockdown. And as I go around the world, and I've talked about this many times now, I'm like I can see it and feel it coming, like, oh, we're just ahead of it. And we get back to the US and then a week later we're shut down, at least in the San Francisco area that led a lot of the country. Right. And I just was like, wow, all of my people are going to be screwed. Our companies are going to be messed up, and I'm going to be messed up. So I think both about them and then personally the impact on me. And I'm like, oh my God, now I'm starting retirement early. And I just was like, okay, what do people need was the first thing. Like, and also like, how are we going to deal? So at this point in life, some of my basic things are pretty well handled. So I'm not quite as desperate as some folks, whether they're a lot, low level or high level or whatever, or income, that are highly leveraged. I wasn't like, if it collapses. So I have more freedom there to think about the impact first, but I am thinking about where is our food, how are we going to survive, like all those basic things that we all thought about. Sure. And our companies were doing the same thing. But then I thought, what do people need right now? And whether or not they're going to pay me or not, they need a good coach. They need a listening ear. They need somebody to help them through the thing, not because I'm much smarter, but just because I don't swim in their particular water. I can see it. I can help them now, and I'm experienced enough in a broad enough world that I can help people navigate that stuff. Well, so I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to give it away. And I just broadcast out, if you're freaked out, I'll help you get through it. Yeah. And I just work nonstop. Just busy. And my revenues plummeted, right? All my speaking engagements canceled or deferred. Some of them moved out a year and others just like canceled. And so the speaking thing, and then some of our coaching clients are like, I can't pay anything. I don't know if I have a business. And I'm like, fine, whatever you need. And so we started waiving and discounting and doing whatever people needed and just like delivering value. And like boldly, and on a global scale. And I was super busy and I was really drained after a period of that. And then I started to put in like breaks and be more thoughtful about the organization of it to make it more sustainable. And then I started to think, okay, how am I going to like lead team sessions or do what structures we're going to do? So we started taking things that we did like in a room, like putting things on the wall and figuring out how to put those on a virtual wall, and how to take workbooks and move that into that setting, and then how to bridge to the software and how to connect people and engage them. And so we started then thinking about how to operate and what do people need? So the first thing is like survival. Am I going to survive? How do I do that? And then what does the world need now? Which is like we talk about, you've learned our sweat exercise. What's going on out there? What do people need? And then starting to think about where's it going? And what can you do? And in fact, many of our clients are now growing again. Good. And our business has grown again. And everything that we lost in mid-March, we've regained now.
Nice.
It's all different. We're working differently, but it's, I'm busy and I'm doing my best work.
Oh, that's I'm so glad to hear that. And I just want to pause for a second, guys. We have an expert CEO, entrepreneur coach here, scaling up coach. This guy's an expert at scale, and there's so many things I could say about Bill. I would spend the rest of the show talking about how amazing you are. But if you do have a business, if you have questions around what's happening in the economy out there, this is a guy that has a front row seats to high growth companies and how they're handling this environment right now. So this is a really unique opportunity to ask some great questions. But I want to ask, so I want to come back to, first of all, I'm hearing this a lot. I was talking to, do you know John Rulin from Giftology?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
Rulin,
we've had him on the show before.
Yeah, I love Rulin. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
He was on the show Monday, and he said the same thing. He said, I'm seeing it like for myself, he makes most of his, businesses through speaking and then bringing on clients through speaking.
Right.
Yeah. He's a great speaker.
Yeah.
But, he lost all his speaking gigs, and then a lot of them pivoted to digital. And then his clients started coming in through these different ways. And he said, I'm seeing the same thing. Some of the people that are not open-minded enough to the pivot are getting their fucking asses handed to them. And the people that are open-minded to the pivot are actually pivoting, and here they are now thriving. They're actually on track to have a better year, or as good of a year as they thought that they were going to have before COVID. What are you seeing? Are you seeing the same thing with your clients? Walk us through that a little bit.
Well, first of all, right, there's staying alive.
Dude, you're a master at this. This is amazing.
And then there's the adapting, right? Then you've got to figure out what's next, right? And lean into that piece of the thing. That's the time when you start to think about where you're going, right?
Your next level. Your next level.
Bust a move. So I think that first part is really, you have to have some room. And when I think about, Lori and I both, and our last business, we still have the business, is a jewelry company. It's radically different and much smaller than it was at the time. But in 2008, it looked like we weren't going to have a business again, and things were off. And I had a coach mentor at the time who said, listen, I want you to go read a couple books. And one of the books he gave me to read is What is the What? And What is the What is an amazing story. It's really great. I think it's really great to read non-business books to deal with business situations, because a lot of business books are kind of boring, although we have their authors on regularly and there's brilliance in them. But What is the What is the recalling and telling of the story of one of the Sudanese lost boys, one of these displaced kids whose villages were burned and families were murdered and that kind of thing. And his tale of survival and that kind of thing. And I've read like Endurance, Shackelford's story before. But this telling of that, and then it's all recounted and told from his perspective as he's laying bound and tied up on the floor of his Atlanta apartment, where he survived this whole epic thing out of Africa and then into the US. And now he's tied up and robbed in the United States by a common criminal. And he tells this whole thing with humor and that kind of thing. So the first thing is developing the resources and the emotional space to deal with what's happening, right? The trauma, the upset, the tumult that you're dealing with. And then the second piece is to find the silver line, to find the opportunity, to find the gift of the time. And back in then, my focus was on trimming things and buying us breathing room. And then Lori's job was to imagine, what would we love to do? What would we engineer? How would we redesign this thing? And our products and everything got re-engineered in that time, very much using the SWET approach, finding the opportunity to pivot. And we changed our product strategy and the cycle of product development, that kind of thing. And ultimately our distribution, we went through a number of years of very rapid growth before we had the next set of problems. and I think that's the key thing right now is figure out, as Wayne Gretzky said, figure out where the puck is going and skate there.
Right.
So starting to move, and I was dealing with this earlier today with one of our ongoing coaching clients. What do people need right now? It's different. Speak to that. Address that. And that's where, speaking to that and figure out what that is really powerful. And then where's it going to go? What's likely to come? Nobody really knows, but you could make some educated guesses and kind of be ready for some things by doing that. And then, there's all the basic stuff of executing well and getting the team aligned and that.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have a question that just came in, but I want to dig into the sweat, because I've heard of this. I haven't actually used that framework before. So we got a question. What is one thing someone can do today to help create a better virtual experience for their clients?
To create a better virtual experience for your clients? Well, like anything, ask yourself, what's it like for them? If you get really interested, you set aside your concerns for yourself. How am I going to get through, and what am I doing? And start thinking about what's it like for them. Then you'll begin to make it. And there are clues. I had a CEO a few months ago who was like, "Oh, I'm sick of all these Zoom meetings. And what can I do? And can I get out of them?" So his first instinct, it's very human, was how do I get out of them while leaving his team behind? And
you guys go deal with the shit I hate, but I'm going to go get out of it.
He recovered very beautifully. I said, "What do you think it's like for them?" And he's like, "Oh, of course." Right. And I'm like, just call it out. Say, I'm sick of these things. Let's make them better together. And he did some of the silly things that I'm doing. In truth, like all our meetings could use a little more music, a little more play, a little more, whether it's in person or virtual, right? Making them more real and more human, less trying to be all buttoned up and that kind of thing. But getting them to be like that all the time. And so he did that. He brought him back in. And so, we might say to people like, go find something meaningful in your house and bring that back and show it to us. Or go take 2 minutes and come up with an embarrassing moment that you're willing to share about, and points for like, opening up and going a little deeper. So we'll engage other human sides of things and then reveal a little bit more. So be real, be human, talk about what you're dealing with, think about what it might be like for them, bring some play into all of it. Play mightn't be one of your values like it is with us, but figure out whatever it is for you that you need to bring in that's missing. Nice. It's a good chance it's one of your values that's kind of just not at work in the new environment.
Well, it's interesting that you're going there. And this is what I talk about a lot in my book, which is, when we go through the, as Vern puts it, the discovery process in our core values, I like to say when core values don't need to be nice, right? When we are authentic and when we discover what our authentic core values are and we put them out there, that tends to be a magnet for people that believe what we believe, right? And yes. It tends to detract, push away people that don't believe what we believe. So I think going back to what you said is if I want to connect with people, and and I think this is really important in the virtual environment, it's really just doubling down on what you already are, magnifying that in a virtual way, so that people because now the avenues of interaction are being completely focused virtually, so that they know where to find you, right? That's the way I see it, and that's what I heard you just say. So that's great. We have a couple more questions here. Oh, yeah. The next question is, what are some areas teams may struggle with when pivoting to working virtually? How can we avoid some of those struggles?
So say the question again.
What are some of the areas teams may struggle with when pivoting to working virtually? How can we avoid some of those struggles?
Okay, so I'm a little bit older and I'm an empty nester and I have that kind of thing, but people have all sorts of competing demands and space issues, right? I have a dedicated home office where I can close the door and I don't have kids coming in. Now, somebody might ring the doorbell or the dogs might bark or that kind of thing. So that's like practical things. But I've had CEOs have kids come running in the space and they can't separate out that, or other leaders in our teams, where kids are intruding, they're doing homeschooling, things like that, animals, that kind of thing. So you've got to manage that kind of thing and start to redesign your life, and then be honest about like what you're dealing with. I had another woman on one of our leadership teams right now living in a city with her partner, and they're in a studio apartment in a very expensive city, and because it's a city, right, they don't get out quite as much in this kind of a time with these sets of concerns. And I'm like, wow, that's hard. So she would take calls like from a closet,
Oh my gosh.
or find a corner where they could do stuff. Right now, you could make that kind of work. I remember when I was a kid, I turned a closet into a photography dark room, and
Right.
I like, I did my photography stuff in that. You could actually turn that into, I mean, the size of my office is the size of some people's walk-in closets. So you could literally kind of create a space for yourself, but you've got to deal with that. And then you've got to appreciate that your people are dealing with these kinds of things. One of the other things I noticed recently is that, like, working in the same place all the time, I needed to move around. I couldn't just sit at this desk all the time with the number of hours, because both the conversations that I might have walking around an office, as well as my independent work, would be all at this desk. So one of the things I did is I made my desk a rising desk, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Nice. I
I
gotta
can
do that.
stand up, or I can, and there are times when I really need to stand up. Not usually when I'm on camera. I don't usually stand up. The angles aren't quite as good, but sometimes I will. And then I'll like, I need to move a little bit. So I, instead of using a balance board or whatever, I have a skateboard under my desk that I'll balance it. And then I replaced the couch that I had that was like a convertible thing over in this side to a more of a reclining chair. It's really
Right.
great when I need like that. So I can walk around, I can stand, I can sit. And I designed all of that, right? But then if you're a leader of a business, how do you help the rest of the company to start to deal with
Right.
that? And some great companies are shipping people standing desks, or that kind of thing. They're helping them get set up, right?
Right.
Just telling your people, look, don't put a window behind you. If you put a window behind you, you're going to look terrible on camera all the time. So in my case, the window's on the opposite side of me. It's across from me, and there's a window there. So there's windows all around, but my back is to this. And then I put a monitor on, because sometimes I'll refer to stuff that I'll put up on the monitor behind me.
Right.
But I have, and most people don't need that kind of thing. But design that space and help your team to design the space out. And then think about like the quality. So the quality of the mic, the quality of the camera. But if people just didn't backlight themselves, they'd have better Zoom meetings. If people had room and permission to organize their day around the childcare and the other kinds of intrusions, you've got to redesign your life, both temporally, the time, like how you spend the day, as well as physically. That space has got to be redesigned now. And I don't think pardon me. I don't think we're going to be out of this anytime soon. I think there's going to be measures of this for more than a year. And then many of us will continue to work on some schedule for a long time to come.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I do think that smart companies. I mean, so I just left my company in November, but I was on the board up until a couple weeks ago, and so I was still talking to them and helping out and stuff like that. And we have a call. I mean, this is it's 500 employees now, but because we sold one of our businesses, but that they have 200 employees who are in a call center working out of their homes. I mean, these are call center employees working out of their
Right.
homes, right?
Right.
And these guys, they saw 11% reduction in productivity because it's a hard job to do from your home. To your
Yes.
point, though, I do think it takes a redesign of the spaces, and some of these folks don't have that luxury, but there are little things you can do. And I think you're coming up with some really great options, which is, heck, make sure your back's against a wall, not the window, right? Because it's
simple. That's really, really basic, right?
Right. Totally.
Position. So I have two monitors in front of me. And so I might normally look at this one or look at this one, but for conferences, I spread the camera and I put the camera halfway down between the two. So I'm looking more dead on the camera. And then I have a couple other cameras around that I could switch to in a different kind of a show. but I can look more closely at the camera and still kind of see you most of the time. So simple things like that make it a better experience.
I haven't perfected that yet. Right now, I'm looking at your forehead, and my eyes are looking into a camera. So I have to set myself up a little bit better.
Well, you could get one of those little tripod selfie sticks, and you could mount a camera and just put it in the middle of the monitor when you go live on something, and stick it up, and then put it as close to the eyes of the other person as possible. Well, you could do things like that can make a difference. Yeah.
So, hey, we have a former accelerator. I was his mentor when you were running the accelerator.
Awesome. Who is it?
My friend, and he was on the show a few days ago, Joshua Abramson.
Josh Abramson. I love you, man.
Yeah, I love him too, man. I sang him More Than Words by Extreme.
Yeah.
And the first line is, saying I love you is not the words I want to hear from you. And he starts laughing super hard. It was really funny. But yeah, we got a question from him. I was at the Modern Elder Academy with Chip Conley.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, dude, nice. Chip, baby. Chip endorsed the book, by the way. So Chip,
Back in love again.
The first week of March, at the point when the global conversation really pivoted, he told us about catastrophe opportunities that he thrived through 3 times in his career. Can you both talk about your experiences with catastrophe opportunities in your careers? I'll let you start.
Oh, I have a lot of stories like that. There are a few principles. Yeah. I was talking a little bit about 2008, 2009. And in that point, it was about first buying some breathing room and then finding the pivot opportunity. Another one that was more in the world of leadership was in the aftermath of 2001. So the economy, the dot-com era was ending. We had 3 companies between my wife and I. I had 2 tech firms and she had this jewelry business. And then September 11th happened and the whole world changed in a blink, even faster blink than we did right now, but in some ways easier to recover from, at least in the near term. As we started to struggle with that, the first thing that we did was essentially use a fair amount of debt to avoid the problem. So as I took over running the business, so we got out of the 2 tech businesses for a while, and I couldn't raise more money for them. The clients were drying up. Like it seemed like and I worked on the jewelry business. I came in as CEO, but and so we used those resources. But then, not long after that, we hadn't solved the fundamental problem like we did later in 2008. And we were going to be out of business. I struggled with that. And the lesson in that was more of a fundamental leadership thing. I tried to carry that alone. I'd always felt like I was the strategist and I was the evangelist, and I wasn't good at selling anything in this particular industry, in this product set. And I didn't have a plan. I didn't have any ideas. So mostly I kept it private for a while. And then it kind of hit a breaking point where we were running out of room to maneuver. And I was spending all my time and energy plotting how to exit and how to survive the collapse instead of what to do. And before I did that, though, I went to the team and I said, guys, I've been holding something private. I've been struggling with something alone. Here's what's going on. The bank wants to shut us down. I don't have an answer. But I've decided not to surrender. I'm going to fight. And I invite you to join me in the battle. I'd love your help, but I don't have the answer. And if you need to go, I understand. If you'd like to stay, I could really use some help. Here's what we got. Here's my promise. I won't quit. I'll be really honest with you. And together we'll figure out something or won't, but it'll be interesting.
Right. Interesting.
But it'll be interesting. And here's the thing. Nobody quit.
Wow.
Nobody quit. People love a challenge. If you engage them a challenge and give them a room and you're honest with them and they're inspired by your commitment is inspiring. Having all the answers is not actually that inspiring. Right. Boldly committing yourself, having it all in line. People want to be part of kind of something like that. Now they have their own personal concerns. to deal with. And fortunately, at that time, there weren't a lot of other options, but people stayed on and they helped us to work through it. And over the next year, we jettisoned the parts of the company that we didn't have the stomach, the nerve to jettison, the courage to jettison before. And we just focused on what was working. So we really, at that time, the exercise was more what's working and easy and what's not working and hard. And then everything, we just stopped it, shut it down. And it didn't look like the working easy column was enough, like that was a business, but it turned out it was. And over the next year, we doubled the business.
Wow.
And we came out and we were better cash, profit, growth, like everything. The team was super proud of itself. And then interestingly enough, shortly after that, quite a few of the people who were part of that kind of moved away from the company because they weren't so much committed to the company or industry as they were that particular challenge. And then other people came in and we moved into the next set of problems.
Yeah. Wow. That's a great story.
Really good. But the courage and the honesty and that actually has become our leading value. First value is courageous authenticity. Share yourself openly. And one of my key hires over the last few years in this team didn't work out. Although they said, oh, that sounds great. They didn't really have that value. They were completely stopped in the area of being open,
right,
and courageous about, whatever their warts and vulnerability. And in fact, they had to quit because they couldn't operate in that kind of an environment. It wasn't where they're comfortable. But that's one of the things that we lead with and that I really learned. I think I already had it, but I didn't have the same access to it that I did today with experience.
Interesting. Well, to add to that, by the way, Joshua, my catastrophe opportunity was I did not play it very well because I was a subprime mortgage lender in 2007 when that whole thing happened. I got my ass kicked for 5 years and I stuck with it and it was painful. But
yes.
you know what I learned out of that experience was that every industry has its own set of values too. The industries have values, not just the companies.
Yes.
And I found, and this is kind of where I'm at right now, where and it's not to say like there's like companies have their own sets of values, and I think that to your point, like just because an employee or a team member's values don't align, it doesn't mean that person's bad. It just means that they're different, right? And so for me, what I found was when things get tough, if your personal values are not aligned with the team or the industry or the environment, sometimes you don't have control over the environment because it might be just, macroeconomic issues or fundamental issues. But so let's put that aside because that is in none of our control really for the most part. But you do have a choice on the industry you're in. And I think it's going into this. And I was talking on another podcast about this where I said, I go into every single business expecting the unexpected and the catastrophe to happen at some point. So that's just like, it's like baked into my model, right? That at some point we're going to go through a lot of hardship. Yeah. And so I'm not, when it's going well, I don't just pretend like that's going to go on in perpetuity. My assumption is we are going to have a black swan event because I don't know, I've been running companies for 20 years and I'm on my fourth one, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think they happen. Maybe the Moore's law is doubling the speed in which black swan events happen as well, not just technology. Because they seem to be happening a lot faster, So
here's an interesting thing I just noticed. So my brother posted something the other day about 1917, 1918. And I'm like, which of my ancestors were alive? And I'm like, oh my God. My grandmother, the relative that I was the closest to growing up, was born in 1918. And my grandfather, who I looked the most like on the other side, he was 6 in 1918. Wow. And my grandmother, his wife, was 9. They lived through that stuff. And then through World War II. And then, on and on and on. They lived through the Depression. And I certainly was very aware of the Depression on my grandfather on the other side and his lessons, very hard won from that. But I started to think about that. Like they lived through that stuff. Depression, Spanish flu, World War II, Cold War, like that was an era that my parents grew up in of duck and cover.
Right.
holy crap, where
Yeah.
we thought the end of our society was imminent all the time.
Yeah, people had bunkers in their backyards, like to
Yes.
survive the nuclear holocaust,
Right.
right?
So when you think about that, like, I don't even know if this is the worst ever. It's certainly extreme, and it's the most dramatic in my lifetime. The most dramatic, like U.S. citizens aren't welcome in the vast majority of the world right now.
Right, right.
Can you imagine? That
For
blue
what?
passport used to be a ticket to almost anything, except
Right.
maybe, Iran, Afghanistan.
Right. But you're making a good point, which is, I mean, the way I see it is the biggest difference now is that we are now in a point where the globalization, our interconnectivity, is never been as strong as it is right now, and our dependency on one another has never been as affected as it is right now. So that changes the landscape, that changes the ground that we stand on. And this is where, and this is a whole different episode, and you and I could probably go to town talking about how our government is approaching this type of stuff. But from a business perspective, and we're running near the end of the hour here, but because I want to talk about one last thing with you. My belief is because of the interconnectivity of the world, and whether you're coming at this from a governmental standpoint, a private business standpoint, a nonprofit standpoint, anything where there's organizations of people trying to get together to make change happen and impact, which most businesses do that, in my opinion. Maybe that impact is for profit. Maybe that impact is to create a sale. But when you're getting people together to do stuff, you got to get them to get together to want to be a part of something to create the result and to do it in the most efficient manner possible.
Most business leaders are inspiring future-based leaders, not fear-based, divisive leaders. So most business leaders have a vision for a better world, and they're marshaling their team and their network of suppliers and vendors and that kind of thing towards that future vision, engaging them in the work that makes the world a better place. And
Right.
our purpose is helping leaders build a better world.
Right.
So mostly they're engaged in that kind of thing, and they're uniting people around that who might come from different cultures, who might have different worldviews, who might have different politics, who might very often have different religions, who prefer different foods, right, who have different family styles. And so we're always looking for that, and we're building an intentional culture in most of our companies. So culture is badass, and you can make your culture intentional instead of accidental. And you can build your culture, as you well know, rooted in values. And that root of the word culture is cult. So create a great cult, not the like kind of cult that makes you give away your money and drink the Kool-Aid and do all that weird crap, but a cult that you're proud of, like a company like Apple. Whether you like Apple or not, you can respect that there's a company that's really unique. Or HP used to be a cult-like environment that was united around particular values and a style and that kind of thing. So you can create an intentional cult that you really love, that represents the very best that you have to offer the world, and that you can hold your head up high about. And that's really a lot of what we're about most of the time, is helping people build that. And that, like, strategies change all the time, and
Right.
and should, as well as the plans that go with them.
Well, I think, and to end on that, I'll say my belief is that when you create that environment, and I think there's a lot of, to your point, intentionality. Like if people took the same intentionality with their products and customer service and customer interactions as they do with the way that they build their culture, if you will, I think that they might be, if they're not doing it well, they would have a business that wasn't going to last very long. And my thoughts around it is, if you really want it to become a cult, you need to operationalize it in everything that you do. And then as things change, there is some consistency around how they're changing, because they're baked in the right ideology of the business.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a big part of it. And I actually think that's where people fall flat, is they don't operationalize it. It stays as these woo-woo soft things. And then they wonder why the guy who has a cult, or the girl that has a cult, is out there kicking their ass. And it's because every single thing they do it with the intention around who they are and why they are,
Yeah. If it's just some words that you put on your website or whatever, then it's not what's really going on. If I think about winning is everything, right? You could name some companies like that, but one that immediately comes to mind is Enron, who is out to compete no matter what the cost is, right? Winning is everything. But you can go on the Internet Wayback Machine and you can see that one of their stated values was one of those BS and throwaway corporate integrity, right? Like, what the hell? Nothing to do with that. So
yeah, last night on that talk I did, I put up all 4 of Enron's values and I played guess the company values game, and no one, their name in Microsoft and all these ones. I said nope, and I busted the Enron logo. I'm like, this is Enron, and I laughed. I said, this is a company. To your point, I call it words on paper. Talk about this in my book. That there's words on paper companies, and then there's core value equation companies, people that have true, authentic, core value driven organizations. So this has been so fun, man. I really appreciate it.
Really fun. Thank you.
Listen, where can people find you?
Scalingcoach.com.
Guys,
that's where we are. Scaling Up Podcast. Just look for Scaling Up in my happy face. Or the scalingcoach.com, where we have over 220 back episodes on everything to do with scaling up and all that, free downloads of our worksheet. I'll even give people a copy of the book for free. So
awesome, man. So you guys, you know where to find Bill. I'm so grateful to have you on the show, my friend. This has been super fun. Everybody, thank you so much today. You can find us on Facebook at The Real Darius M or at www.therealdarius.com. Can't wait to see you guys on the next episode. Have a good one.
Thanks.